The innovation, the flair of John Barilaro. Here's John, Deputy Premier of New South Wales, creates a new government job, Trade Commissioner. And lo and behold, he leaves politics and suddenly finds himself to be the very finest candidate for this new role of Trade Commissioner, which pays $500,000 a year and carries a $100,000 expense account, just what John needs. We're all about jobs today, people with no jobs, people with high-paying jobs, people with low-paying jobs, and of course, Liberal flair with stacking government bodies with ex-Liberal staffers, jobs for the boys and jobs for the girls. But just to get to John, this vile and scurrilous criticism of our former Deputy Premier for being the best candidate for this role is outrageous. There was another candidate who believed that she actually got the job, a Jenny West, this person who had 20 years experience in global trade and multiple degrees, even more than a Cert 4 from TAFE, from the Housing Industry Association. But let's face it, what does a Trade Commissioner do? A Trade Commissioner goes to lunch. And who is better qualified to go to lunch than John? Would Jenny West know whether to have a Pinot Grigio with the scampi? Would she know what sauterne to choose with which dessert? Would she know whether a claret or a burgundy was a better choice with the venison? No, she would not. But John is the man for this job. As Dom Perignon says, the Premier of New South Wales, the process was conducted completely at arm's length and with all proper processes in place. This was an independent process, said Dom Perignon. And so it is that it is a mere coincidence that John has got the job, just like the coincidence when he was about to sue the comedian, setting another standard, a very high bar there from John, the first politician in New South Wales perhaps to sue a comedian because he had hurt feelings. And then suddenly the terror police, the New South Wales terror squad, turns up and arrests and cuffs his producer, Christo. So these coincidences do happen, particularly with John. And that's the kind of innovation, the kind of flair that this man has. And make no mistake, the Liberal Party are masterminds when it comes to creating jobs for themselves. Look at the AAT. This is the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. And a whole bunch of Liberal faithful, ex-advisors, staffers have ended up in extremely high-paying jobs at the AAT. Now, what does the AAT actually do? It deals with complaints. Any complaint about an official body, a government body, goes to the AAT. And so what does the AAT do? Nothing, of course. They just make you fill out a whole lot of forms and nothing ever happens. And even if they did make a finding, there are no enforcement powers anyway. So it's the perfect job in the perfect Liberal Party tradition. So while it is super easy for ex-Liberals to get very high-paying jobs, what about people with no jobs? What about the unemployed? How are they going to go? Well, ScoMo, of course, this was one of his parting gifts to the nation, came up with a brilliant new reform. It's called Workforce Australia. Workforce Australia is the reinvention of Job Active, the failed job service outsourcing program, which feather-bedded American multinationals, a whole lot of fee takers who purported to be getting Australians jobs and basically ticked a lot of boxes and had big plush government contracts. Now, under Workforce Australia, there's a new point system, PBAS, they call it, Points-Based Activation System. And this will replace the standard job application requirements. So each month, job seekers will need to make up 100 points to fulfil their mutual obligations or have their payments cut off. You might recall during the pandemic, mutual obligations were just dumped. They just got rid of it. No working for the dole, none of this having to muck around, running around looking for 20 jobs a month. Because, of course, what happened is so many people lost their jobs that the government realised that there were Liberal voters amongst them also, and so they doubled the job seeker allowance. When the pandemic was over, or not really over, they pulled back the job seeker allowance back to $40 a day and chucked an extra $4 a day at the poor old unemployed, which enables them to buy 3/4 of an iceberg lettuce now. But mutual obligations under Workforce Australia are back. So Labor's employment guy, Tony Burke, has said that the mutual obligation scheme needs to change. It should not be so strident, enforcing all these obligations on the unemployed. We're yet to see the final outcome here, but there's a lot of pressure on Burke at the moment, basically, to walk this back. So Labor has a few challenges here because, of course, the last thing it needs right now is to be forking out $200 billion for tax cuts for people that don't need them, for the high-income earners, $9,000 extra in the kitty. Because, of course, the low and middle-income earners are going to lose their tax offset, the Lamito offset, come the end of this month. So the high-income earners get an extra $9,000. The low-income earners lose $1,080 a year. The unemployed have suddenly got to meet the criteria under this mutual obligation program, 100 points, and John Barilaro goes to lunch. And we ought to bear in mind, of course, too, that John wasn't unemployed at the point that he got this job because he has become a director of a property development company. So it's a very good thing, too, that this new government role allows him a $100,000 a year expense allowance to go to lunch and dinner, of course, not just lunch, because, of course, you know, these nurses and teachers trying to get their 5% pay rise, you know, this is outrageous. I mean, John's expense account at $100,000 is more than they earn on average. But of course, we're talking about innovation, creativity. Who could possibly be more deserving of a $100,000 a year expense allowance than John Barilaro? He is a man of great flair and innovation. Nobody deserves this more than John.
Oh, by the way, I was being sarcastic.
Well, duh.
There are no jobs for the boys here at Michael West Media. We thank you in the community for helping to fund us.